BBC Radio York, Lunch with Ellie sitting in for Jonathan now. Team from North Yorkshire is part of a convoy of about 200 vehicles from 17 countries, which is making their way to Gaza. The ambulance left York at the beginning of December to take humanitarian aid to the people living there. When I spoke to them on Christmas Day, they were in Jordan and they had all kinds of problems with the Egyptian embassy. In the team are Heather and Steve Stroud, Mike Gwilliam and Nicholas Hall. We can catch up with Heather now. Good afternoon, Heather.
Hello.
Now, tell us what's been happening since Christmas Day, because the last time I spoke to the team on Christmas Day, they were urging people to get in touch with the Egyptian embassy so that you could actually get permission to continue on the journey and make your way to Gaza. What stage are you at now?
Well, we are moving. We're heading back towards the Syrian border. The latest that we've been told is that we're going to a port in Syria, and then the Turkish government are going to pay for ships to take the vehicles to Al Arish in Egypt. Now, that is still negotiation. So, I mean, our feeling is half the time we don't know anything. We know less than you, and sometimes we've asked people in England what's going on because we don't always know. All I can say is I believe the negotiations are taking place. So we have left Aqaba. We are driving north, and we're determined to get to Gaza.
Who's actually working on your behalf? Because obviously you've picked up extra vehicles along the way. I think it was about between 70 and 80 left London. And as you've travelled through the countries, people have joined the convoy. But who's actually doing all the negotiating with the authorities and, embassies and things like that?
Well, we did hear George Galloway make one remark about, it's Viva Palestina who are organising it, but we're working very closely with the Turkish government and with a group called IHH, and they've provided loads of vehicles. And it is actually the Turkish government that I think are now leading the negotiations, because they're a very powerful country and have a lot of clout out here. Now, George Galloway did make a comment about his retreating from the negotiations to allow two gracious ladies. And I know at one point there was talk of the Mubarak's wife and the Queen of Jordan to try and negotiate on our behalf. So hopefully they are involved, but I don't know that.
Of course, the thing to mention is, whilst this is a hugely politically charged situation, and we were hearing reports about the 1 year anniversary of the conflict between Israel and Gaza. This was reported on the news this week. Your convoy is totally humanitarian.
It is totally humanitarian, but at the same time, we do believe that the siege of Gaza has to end because basically genocide is taking place there. That there just isn't sufficient food. Children are malnourished. The hospitals can't function. Now Egypt is building this massive wall. So Gaza doesn't actually want aid. What they want is to live in dignity and freedom. So I don't call that political, but some people might.
Absolutely. Well, we know that sort of around the world it is seen as political. It's been ongoing for a long time. But the aid that you're taking through, you actually want to hand that over personally, don't you?
Well, we do. And in fact, we have contact with the Red Crescent Hospital, which is a non-political organisation. And we're hoping to hand it over to them. I have their telephone number. I speak to them. They're expecting, the ambulance and the medicines, and we have educational material. We have fleeces for either the hospital or the refugee camps. So there's lots of things we would love just to be able to hand over.
How important is it that this convoy does get through and you're able to hand the aid over?
I think it's absolutely critical, and for me, what is happening in Gaza is such a massive injustice that I think a lot of conflict around the world stems from this injustice. Other countries, particularly in the Middle East, feel aroused and inflamed by what is happening. So I think this is at the heart of, Bush's so-called war on terror. I think this is at the heart of it, this injustice. Not that I'm saying it's Palestinians who are terrorists, because they're not. But this is...
However, they do retaliate. There will be people listening to this. I was trying to keep away from the politics, but
yes, okay.
as you've talked about it, I have to say to you that, Palestinians do retaliate. Firing back is not the way to deal with it.
Well, I'm a pacifist, so... but what I can say is that they are bombarded by, bombs are dropped on them all the time. They're starved, their water's contaminated, and under international law, people do have the right to resist. And while I don't agree with the Qassam rockets, I also think that we should be looking at the bombs that Israel is dropping and not be focused on the Qassam rockets that come out of a place that's besieged and people are dying.
Well, we wish you well getting the humanitarian aid through. Thank you very much indeed. We'll follow you closely on BBC Radio York. That's Heather Stroud. That's part of that team from North Yorkshire. The team includes Steve Stroud, Mike Gulliam and Nicholas Hall. We heard on Christmas Day how they set off, and it was between 70 and 80 vehicles that set off from London. And as they've travelled through the various countries, it's now got up to about 200 vehicles from 17 countries who are trying to make their way to Gaza to actually hand over that aid personally. Lunch with Ellie, sitting in for Jonathan.